Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American Haunt Historian, Alan Searcy. Yeah, I got a real big show for you guys today. I'm excited to be here. The holidays are here. Thanksgiving is tomorrow? Yeah, so let's talk about some spooky stuff. So I got the new books, Hexed, The Voodoo Doctor in Knoxville. Crazy wild story based off a real story in Knoxville, Voodoo Doctor. Doesn't get much better than that. Also, I got Below the Trestle. It's based off the Pope Lit Goat Man. I sold a bunch of those back in October. The book's been pretty well received according to the reviews there on Amazon. Yeah, the books make great Christmas presents, and they fit perfectly in a stocking, just FYI. Also, they're free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited and also the Audible Premium program. So, yeah, you can find them online, but, like me, I like to hold the book in my hands and go through it, but, that's me. So, also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave a review. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys are listening to the show, please leave a review. Those are so helpful. So I mentioned that I had a big announcement this week, right? So starting December, the first week of December, the podcast is going twice a week. I'll have one, I think, on Tuesday and then as well on Friday. You guys know that I had the radio show in Portland, Tennessee. There were so many hiccups. If you guys listened to the show back in the summer, there were some shows weren't getting recorded. There was problems with the soundboard. I had to use my phone. The live show we had, I had to tape that with my phone too. All kinds of hiccups. So I decided to walk away from that and just do the show by myself. I'm a one-man shop. So, but I'm looking forward to doing the show twice a week. I can, tell more stories, more interaction with you guys. And I love doing the Q&A, so send me stuff on Southern Ghost Stories Facebook or Southern Ghost Stories Instagram. So I had someone reach out to me, when was it? A couple weeks ago. They said, you never do anything in New York. Well, I was actually in New York last year, and there were so many wild stories. I thought, hey, let's do an episode on Albany. So everybody thinks New York City, but Albany, there's a lot of wild stuff up there too. So Albany, New York, it's not just the capital city of New York State. It's a city built on centuries of history, and where there's history, there's secrets and a lot of fun ghost stories. So today, we're diving into some of Albany's eeriest tales, an unsolved true crime that was involved in the United States Postal Service, the state capitol there, and a friendly ghost, supposedly, is trapped in the state library. So the first thing I want to get to, and this is really wild, I was digging into this, and I got kind of tickled at it. I mean, it's really a sad story. I shouldn't be tickled. But, so, it's a story. It's not just a legend. It's heartbreaking. It's an unsolved true crime tale that shocked Albany, New York in the Roaring '20s. So, in 1922, the body of a newborn baby girl arrived at an Albany undertaker's office. And it wasn't delivered by a person, by hand. It was delivered by the United States Parcel Post mail. So, inside this package that the undertaker received, it was a deceased infant. They think it was smothered. And there was a $5 bill left on her body. And that was the grim payment for the service this undertaker is going to provide burying the baby. So, back in 1913, the U.S. Postal Service introduced the Parcel Post. And that allowed people to ship packages weighing anything under 50 pounds. Well, this is a massive change for rural America. Because the rules were being established and the service was still so new, there's a little gray area, some wiggle room there. There were no specific regulations banning the mailing of a live human being, as long as the weight limit was, under 50 pounds and the package was paid for. And this led to several verified cases where parents actually mailed their small children, usually toddlers, short distances to family members like grandparents. They would simply attach a postage stamp to the child's clothing, and the child would be personally escorted by a postal carrier to their grandparents' house. It was cheaper than buying a train ticket. I mean, that's wild, but I mean, it's still pretty creative too. You're trying to save some money and you want your kids to go see the grandparents. Yeah. But the public reaction was kind of mixed on this, and people were amused. Some were outraged over the safety concerns, and rightfully so. So I have a child. I have a 6-year-old little boy, and I would not send him to see my dad by the U.S. Postal Service. The Postmaster General officially issued a regulation in 1914 that forbidded the mailing of any more children. So back in 1922, getting called back up to what I was talking about earlier, the dead baby that was sent by mail. The tragic mailing of the dead baby's deceased body, it was a deliberate act of concealment and not a strange hiccup in the postal regulations. The postmaster had a witness. They said that they saw a neatly dressed, typically American 16-year-old girl mailing the heavy parcel that matched what the baby was shipped in. So I guess just on that statement there, I guess a young teenage girl, she probably got pregnant by her boyfriend out of wedlock. Maybe concealed it from her parents. Maybe her parents knew about it, but either way, baby didn't make it, and they sent it to the undertaker to be buried and disposed of. The identity of the mother and the baby, they never were discovered. And the investigation, it went cold pretty quickly, as you would imagine, especially back in the early 20th century, without DNA and all the stuff we have today to look into the cases. So the residents in Albany, they were really moved by the callousness and just the tragedy. And, it's heartbreaking, a dead baby. So the community kind of rallied around this little baby. It was in all the newspapers. Everybody knew about it. They raised a lot of money to have a proper funeral for the child. Well, they wound up naming the baby Parcella Post, which, it's awful, but it's a sweet little name for a dead little baby girl who was sent by parcel, in the post office. She was buried at Graceland Cemetery in a special white glass-covered casket. And you can actually still go see the headstone today. You can Google it. You can Google Parcella Post, and you'll see this tombstone in the cemetery there where the little baby was buried. So, yeah, just heartbreaking. It's a terrible, awful story, but still it's kind of weird and wild, which is kind of, my thing. So let's transition from that weird, wild case to something else even crazier. So from a grave in Graceland, we moved to the heart of government and a subtle stone curse in the New York State Capitol. In the mid-1860s, New York State, they needed a bigger seat of government. The old State House in Albany was crumbling, and it was pretty much just inadequate for the needs of the largest and most dynamic state in the Union at the time. New York, even today, it's one of its most populated states in the country. So you can only imagine before the Civil War, the West is pretty much untamed once you get past like Missouri and Arkansas. There wasn't much out there. So like New York is the largest state in the United States of America. So they started construction in 1867, and it dragged on for a pretty long time. And they didn't get done with it until 1899. So the cost, the project, it was notorious for escalating cost, and ultimately cost $25 million at the time, which is, a staggering amount. So you got to think that's probably, several hundred million in today's money. But this massive expenditure and scale, it's what gave the main internal feature, the Great Western Staircase, its nickname. They called it the $1 Million Staircase. They still call it that today. So the sheer length of the project meant it went through 5 different architectural teams and styles and resulted in a unique, sometimes inconsistent mix of Romanesque, Renaissance, and Neo-Greek designs. The staircase itself was a monumental work of art. Like, if you Google it, it's beautiful. They employed hundreds of master stonemasons and carvers, which are largely immigrants from Scotland and Italy and Ireland that worked on this grand staircase. Well, the people who were in charge of the project, they gave the carvers a lot of artistic freedom, which, today if they built a new state house somewhere, in Tennessee or Delaware, anywhere, the state would pretty much hands-on tell you what they want done. But back then, hey, these artists, hey, do what you want. So they immortalized in the staircase figures who were important to them, leading the staircase to be filled with heroes and presidents. There's a bust of Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, George Washington, other historical figures. The carvers also included portraits of family members, friends, and even celebrities of the day, turning the staircase into a democratic portrait gallery. So all kinds of people visited the State House. Teddy Roosevelt, he was the governor of New York there, and was sworn in as vice president of the United States in the Capitol there in that building in 1901. And he was there before Kennedy's assassination, which eventually became president, right? FDR, like Teddy, he was also a New York governor. Spent a lot of time in that building, navigating the start of the Great Depression from his executive chambers there before he became president. Grover Cleveland, he's also a governor in New York. He worked out of that building. Luminaries, all kinds of important people came in and out of there. But let's get back to that grand $1 million staircase. So I told you these masons, they could do pretty much whatever they want. But hidden within the intricate scrollwork of the staircase is a tiny, deliberately obscured face. And they say it's the face of the devil. So Albany lore says there's a disgruntled stonemason. Maybe he was underpaid. Maybe he got fired. No one really knows for sure. But he carved this small demonic face as a secret curse on the building and the officials who govern from it. So yeah, it's nuts. It's kind of just tucked away. You can see George Washington, you see Ulysses S. Grant, and then kind of tucked away over in one little corner is the face of the devil. It's really, really wild and weird. But they say that this thing is really cursed. The mason who carved it into the staircase, it really put a curse on the building. And the curse is historically blamed for the massive and devastating 1911 Capitol fire. There was a massive fire that broke out in the Assembly Library, possibly starting from faulty wiring or a cigar no one put out. The fire was catastrophic. It raged out of control, and it destroyed the entire western section of the Capitol. It consumed the vast Assembly Library and destroyed over 700,000 priceless documents, books, and irreplaceable historical records that wiped out a wing of the state's historical memory. It's nuts. But it caused millions of dollars in damage and reinforced the idea that the cursed building was doomed to bad luck. The fire also resulted in the death of Samuel Abbott. He was an elderly night watchman. Well, there's also another little piece of this curse and the lore from the staircase, the little devil there. The final piece of the legend is there's an old saying that anyone who can walk to the staircase and spot the hidden devil's face without being told exactly where it is, supposedly they are evil themselves or they are in league with the devil. So, yeah, good luck, go find it. And if you find it, there's something wrong with you, I guess. So let's get back to Samuel Abbott. I told you guys there was a night watchman who died there in that fire. Well, Samuel Abbott, he was a 78-year-old Civil War veteran and the Capitol's night watchman. He had served the state for years. Well, Abbott, he was the only fatality in that horrible fire in 1911, which wiped out the library. Well, his body was found in a hallway on the 4th floor, and he was identified only by his pocket watch. His body was that badly burned. Accounts suggest he may have delayed his exit to check for others. So, according to the lore there in the Capitol building, Abbott's spirit's believed to be trapped there, and he's forever trying to just make his rounds and just take care of the Capitol. Employees and visitors, they frequently report the smell of smoke, wet ash, in certain upper floor hallways. They also hear the sound of jangling keys that he would have carried with him. There's also unexplained doors that people will lock and they'll be unlocked when they come back. They hear rattling doorknobs on the 4th and 5th floors. I told you he was found there on the 4th floor. There's also sightings of an apparition of an older man in a watchman's uniform pacing the hallways late at night. It's really wild. They say that they see him peering into offices or checking on people who are working late. I don't know, man, that's pretty wild, but he was the only guy who died in that fire. So the next thing I want to get to, there was an artist named William Morris Hunt. So Hunt was a prominent American artist commissioned in the late 1870s to paint two enormous murals in the assembly chamber there of the building. The murals were called The Flight of Night and The Discoverer. The murals were a huge undertaking. They painted directly onto the chamber's sandstone walls. Due to moisture and flaws in the stone, the murals began to flake and deteriorate shortly after they were completed. Well, when the chamber's vaulted ceiling was found to be structurally unsound, the ceiling was lowered, and it pretty much ruined Mr. Hunt's magnificent paintings. So, the other ghost story there in the Capitol in Albany, Mr. Hunt, he suffered from a nervous exhaustion and despair over the loss when the murals were ruined, and he died shortly after they were recovered. He died in 1879. Some say it was suicide. He was that distraught over his murals being messed up. Well, they say his spirit said to be a very bitter, resentful presence that's tied there to the building. That's where he worked, a long time on those murals, and then they just ruined them. But they say they've reported disembodied voices in the assembly chamber, which on at least one occasion, someone heard the words, "William Hunt is behind the door," a possible reference to the tiny crawl space created when his work was covered. Yeah, I don't know, man. That's pretty wild. But there's another structure, another building there in Albany that's also historic that they say is extremely haunted. So it's the grand marble column New York State Education Building, which houses a state library. And according to Albany lore, this is kind of fun, there was an Italian stonemason named Jason who was there working on the building when it was constructed, and he was pouring concrete for the foundation as they were just getting started. Well, according to the legend, somehow he tripped and he fell into the concrete, and they were already behind schedule. They were having problems. Well, the foreman there, I guess he didn't like Jason. He just said, "Hey, keep pouring the concrete. We're behind schedule. We got to get this done." And they say this mason was just smothered in the concrete, and he's now stuck there in the foundation of the building. So they say that Jason's spirit haunts the lowest levels of the building, primarily the vast dark stacks of the state library, sometimes nicknamed the dungeon by those who work there. But they say that, even though he got stuck in concrete and it was really someone's fault, he's not a vengeful ghost. He's a friendly ghost. He's benevolent. He's still trying to work, they say. Students and researchers kind of report the same thing. The sound of shifting materials, or certain instances, someone's looking for a book that's really hard to find. They're going up and down the aisles. Well, as they're walking down the aisles, the book they're looking for will fall right off the shelf onto the floor in front of them. And some have said they've been looking for books and it falls right there in their hands. So Jason, he's the helpful, silent spirit of the stacks, and he's just really forever bound to the structure that became his tomb. So another really cool building there is the New York State Executive Mansion. Well, when it was built in 1856, the Executive Mansion, it wasn't built to house the governor. It was a massive private residence constructed for a wealthy Albany banker and dry goods merchant named Samuel Tilden. Well, if you're a history nerd like me, you'll remember Tilden. He was the 1876 Democratic nominee for president who went head-to-head with Rutherford B. Hayes. Well, spoiler alert, Hayes won. Tilden, he didn't get the nod. So, by the 1870s, the state of New York, it recognized the need for an official, permanent residence befitting the prestige of the state capital. The legislature ultimately purchased the sprawling mansion from its second owner for $45,000 in 1875. That's a whole lot of money today. It officially became the governor's residence that same year, and that's where the governor lives, even today. So in 1875, it has been the personal home and working base for New York governors, including figures like Grover Cleveland, Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, his cousin, all three who went on to become president. Well, this long history has filled the mansion with centuries of activity and not just political intrigue and high stakes decisions, but there's been drama. Families have joy, tragedy, and these are very powerful people. So all kinds of weird stuff there. But the residents have and their families have reported unusual phenomenon for generations in this old house from the 1800s. And the legend goes, they say that there's a young boy, possibly the child of one of the former governor's family. No one really knows. Maybe a servant who died, and he's just kind of forgotten there, and now he's in the home. Well, the most common reports involve like an audible, non-visual activity emanating from like locked spaces like the attic. Staff often hear the distinct sounds of marbles rolling around the old wooden floors, or the sound of like children playing with toys. The sounds are clear and persistent, but when people go up there to see what's going on, there's nothing. It's just, it's empty space. So another ghost story there in the governor's residence, Teddy Roosevelt, and he was the governor of New York from 1899 to 1900. He was known for his strong opinions and high energy. And something, this is completely off topic, but one of the saddest things I've ever heard, Teddy Roosevelt, this is years before he became governor. I think he was a lawyer. He was a businessman in New York State. Well, his mother died. Well, a few hours later, his wife died. His mother and his wife died on the same day. And that's just heartbreaking. Can you imagine the two most important women in your life, not arguably two most important people in your life, dying on the same day? So that Teddy Roosevelt, during that time, he kept a journal, he kept a diary. And on that day, there's just an X. So I think he wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." Seriously, what else can you say? That's just terrible. But anyway, some speculate that Teddy Roosevelt, even though he didn't die there, they say that's where his ghost is today. And the lore suggests that Roosevelt's strong personality extends beyond the grave, and he's just the spectral, opinionated resident who resides now in the governor's mansion. And they say that when he was there, he disliked the mansion's interior. In an eerie extension of the historical distaste, staff and residents have sometimes reported small, strange occurrences related to the mansion's art and furnishings. So sometimes they find portraits subtly placed in different objects. Objects will, like paintings or the art there, will be like tilted, be turned away from the room center. Minor pieces of decor has been shifted around. It's like some fussy and invisible resident still walking the halls and subtly judging the place and rearranging things he doesn't like. So, Roosevelt's spirit provides a unique, politically tinged haunting, suggesting the mansion is still governed in part by one of the strongest personalities of its past residents. So, as we wind things down, please check out Hex, the book about the Voodoo Doctor, 1940s Knoxville. It's a really fun book. I think you guys would enjoy it. Below the Trestle, also, the Pope Let Go Man. Who doesn't love a good monster story? And Louisville's got that creature that's been throwing people off the bridge for decades. Also, be sure you're checking out Monster City Madhouse. Every day is Halloween. Specialize in premium Halloween and classic horror shirts with that vintage look. Save 10. Use that code, save 10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing available. Christmas is right around the corner. So go get you some really cool Halloween or classic horror shirts. The new shirt, Vol Halloween, he's got out. It's really cool. Gravestone's got the old kind of like Tombstone with the Tombstone movie posters, but it's a classic monsters walking out looking for a fight. Look up Gravestone. It's a really cool shirt they have over at MonsterCityMadhouse.com. And leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys find us. Leave a review and send us some comments or some. Go to our Facebook page, Southern Ghost Stories Facebook. Leave us some questions. I look forward to doing a Q&A probably in January here in a few weeks once things die down from the holidays. I've got a few questions last week I want to dig into, but send me your questions for the Q&As. I love getting into those. But next week I'm gonna do something kind of fun, something kind of weird. I'm gonna kind of stay up north. Actually, I'm going to the Midwest. You guys know I went to Wisconsin last year. I'm going to do a show in Madison, Wisconsin. I found a lot of wild, weird stuff that we're going to talk about next week. So yeah, check back next week and let's do some fun stuff in Wisconsin. I'll see you guys then.